I turn, pulling from my father's touch, and give Cole a bored look as my heart breaks. So this is the boy who's riled up my little sister. He's dirty, though we've wiped most of the blood from his face. His Victorian uniform has been replaced with a jumpsuit made by a hole in the wall. It doesn't fit right, like they scanned him with his hands bound. Still, I want to wrap my arms around him, to breathe him in. My father chuckles. Frey had nothing to compare him to. Our fault, perhaps, for not widening her education. Cole stares back at me. For a brain-missing moment, I expect him to see through my disguise, as if he'll somehow just know who I really am. But he looks horrified by me, like I'm some uncanny plastic replica of myself. I promised him that Raffia was on our side, and yet here she is, plotting with her father. I stare into Cole's eyes, imploring him to read my thoughts. It's going to be okay. But it isn't. He's wearing a bomb collar, too, not a necklace like mine. A thick, dark ring like a dog collar. I was going to keep him hostage, my father says, to make the Victorians behave. But what's the point now? Their army's gone. So we will let him go? I ask lightly, a gesture of goodwill. My father lets out a roaring laugh. I've missed your sense of humor, Raffia. I nod, taking the compliment as always. Then what do we do with him? My father shrugs. We show those protesters how we deal with our enemies. I stare, not understanding, and think what it will do to Frey, my father says. Watching him executed will finally break her spirit. Executed? For an awful moment, the room darkens around me. I see a portrait of Cole hanging down in the trophy room, across from his mother's. My heart rails in the cage of my chest. My father narrows his eyes. What is it, Raffia? I draw a slow breath, my mind racing for an answer. An execution, Daddy? My voice is quivering. On the feeds, what will the other cities think? He gives a tired sigh. It's too late to worry about our reputation. Your sister's speech has seen to that. But what if there's a way to fix it, to make them accept your control of Victoria? He stares at me, his eyes bored and heavy-lidded, like he's made and discarded 100 plans to rehabilitate himself. Like what, darling? I don't know what to say. I don't know how to save someone with words. All I understand is improvised weapons, finding weaknesses, and fighting with all my heart. All I know is war. I stand up and turn toward Cole, my eyes pleading. He stares back at me, uncertain why I'm trying so hard to save him. We connect, a slant of air kindling between us, and I see the answer. What if Cole Palafox wasn't your prisoner, or your enemy at all? What if he was your son? I turn back to my father, twisting my lips into Raffia's cruelest smile. What if, instead of killing Cole, you give him to me? There's a moment of silence. Thoughts scuttle across my father's face, too quick to interpret. It feels like the tower is tipping around us, broken by last night's blast, broken by all my mistakes. At last, my father murmurs, an alliance of blood. No more Victorian citizens resisting. No legitimate claim to Victoria for Tio Palafox. The perfect excuse for the other cities to buy our metal again. A low roll of laughter comes from my father, but he's shaking his head. No one would believe it unless we put the wedding on the feeds. Are you going to hold a knife to his throat? I turn to Cole and reach out, stroke his arm. He shudders at my touch. It's going to be okay. I'll persuade him, Father. You know how persistent I can be when it comes to getting what I want. How steadfast. A realization flashes across Cole's face. Then he drops back into character, turning away from me, defiant. I lean close to my father like I'm whispering a joke. The two of us married. Think what that will do to poor Frey. That's when he laughs the hardest, rising grandly from his chair to gather me into a hug. My first hug from my father ever. I've never felt this before, the heat of his body, the mass of him, the greed. And that's when the rest of the plan comes clear. The same night I escape this tower, my father will die at my hands.